Okay, so I've had enough questions about how I do my click tracks and put them together and do all that kind of stuff that I thought it would be kind of nice to put together a video that just shows how we do what we do. And not only how to record our click tracks, but also how do we play them back during service and things like that. Just so you know, my equipment, we are using a 13-inch MacBook Pro, and and then as a playback device, we use the Scarlett 6i6 by Focusrite. It's a pretty good price. Or a pretty good price point for recording interface. But the main reason that we got it was that it had multiple outputs on the back. So what we do, and I'll show you this in our recording software, what we do is we actually utilize the separate outputs to be able to keep click track and playback tracks separate. Obviously, you don't want the click track going to the mains, so that's kind of how we do it. So the software that I use is Studio One, and so I'll get into that for just a second. But basically, I never really liked most of the click track sounds that I found in Loop Community or Multitracks or whatever, and so being the tinkerer that I am, I just decided to create some. And so let me show you a little bit. So here is kind of how I have things organized. So we have our guide track file. So these are the original recordings that I made. And so here you can see I actually have a person here that works in the church office that I liked their voice. And so we use them. So you can see just on this, they just recorded numbers, they recorded words, things like that. So here's this.
One.
So you can hear that. And then, I broke them all down by different things that I wanted. I was going to want to have it say instruments, interlude, intro, outro, etc. You guys get the idea. So it's all the basic kind of song parts that you would see in a click track that you would get from Multitracks or something anyways. So that's how we do that. And then I create practice tracks out of all of our songs that we do, so you can see how many of them I have at this point. Basically, for the most part, they're all just me on acoustic with our click track in the background. And so you'll see that here in just a second. And then when I bounce down all of our tracks, I keep them in a separate folder here. So like if we were, I'll show you Build My Life. So this weekend we're doing Build My Life. I keep them in here, and they're all organized by click guide. And then sometimes when we don't have a bass player, I'll actually record a bass part. We'll play it back in service, just like I'm sure a lot of you have probably done that. So that's kind of my file structure. And, there's a bunch of other stuff that's to that. You can be a lot more creative. You can do whatever you want. So that's that. And then let's get into Studio One here. So this is my session for Build My Life. So you can see here is the vocal track, and then you can see obviously the acoustic guitar track. And then here's the click track right here. And this is actually something that is built into Studio One. But if you go down here, you can actually change what sounds you use. And so here you can see it says cowbell high with tambourine, cowbell low, and then cowbell. And so these are sounds that I have chosen because I liked the sound of them so that I could hear what I want to hear on our click track, right? And so you can go in here and you can do pre-roll, pre-count, how high the accent is, how high the beat, the offbeat, etc. For most of our songs, under probably about 110 beats per minute, we do subdivisions on the click track. And so if we listen here, and one really quick thing too, if you look at the beginning, you can see this is how I create my guide tracks. So the ones I was showing you earlier, the files, I just drag them right in. I can line them up with our count. So you see 1, 2, 1, intro, 2, 3, 4. And here's how it sounds.
1, 2, intro, 2, 3, 4.
So the thing that I like about it is that I was able to be in control over what type of sound our click track was. I wanted it to be something that was musical, something that wasn't going to be a distraction. And so our church has existed for about 25 years at this point, maybe 26 years. And just in the last year and a half, we started using click track and tracks, things like that. And so we started just with click track, and that's when I came up with this stuff. And design the sounds and the process. So basically, I just record the song. I put all the parts in, so you can see. I'll zoom in here. You can see this is our chorus. I'll show you here.
Chorus.
So you hear the song part announcements, a measure before we actually start those parts. And then in Studio One, up here, you can see this bar. Let me turn it on so you can see it turn blue. So this bar up here is loop range. So you can define a loop range, and you can also do a song start and end. And so when I'm bouncing down my tracks, I'll set a loop range, and then I'll do it for maybe like a measure or two. Or if there's an instrument that hangs over that rings out at the end, obviously I'll have it a little bit longer. And then I can go up here to song. I can do export stems, and then I can go through here, and I can choose which stems I want to send. So basically that is creating individual tracks out of each one of those channels. And then this is what it's going to be called. And then here's where I define where it's going to be saved. So obviously you saw this earlier. So I'll go here and build my life. And so you can see them here. And so that is the result. So I can define it between loop or between song start and end. And so that's actually how I get the tracks exported out of Studio One to be something that I can use in whatever software. You don't have to use Studio One, obviously, because this is just creating WAV files, so it really doesn't matter. And so then I'll take each song. Each song has a session like this. I'll take each song, and then I will create a live service. So you'll see this here. So I'll create a live service out of it. And in here, you can see each song throughout the service. So build my life is here, right? So I start a tag here, and you can see it says stop at marker. So the nice thing is when we're playing here, we can just let it run. It'll stop, and then I have a little 3-button MIDI foot switch that starts the tracks again. And I can put tags in here like that. But the cool thing about this is that you can see the whole service all laid out. There's a lot of ways that doing something like what's it called? Oh, Ableton. There's ways that doing Ableton actually can be obviously much more flexible. For us, going back to a different chorus or repeating something is very difficult. You can kind of build it in, or you can do something quiet at the end of the track or whatever it is. But that's kind of how we do it. We're limited. That's what we have. We're going to probably be going to Ableton hopefully sometime this year, so we can be a little bit more flexible like that. But for our purposes and for how we've been using it so far, this has been just perfect. And so you can see here, this is like I said, this is our service. So here's our song Rejoice. You can set a tempo here. It has a tempo track. So that way, all of the bar lines, you can see they line up with the click track. So I set the tempo in the song, and then in here I also set the tempo so it all lines up nicely. And then song parts makes it easier to go through if we in rehearsal, if we need to go back to something. So we're doing Rejoice, we're doing He is Faithful, Build My Life, and ending with No Other Name. And so it just basically plays start to finish. This is the only song that we have extra tracks on. And all of this stuff is stuff that I recorded myself. I haven't gotten any of this stuff from anyone. It's not pre-manufactured. So like all these lead guitar parts, I recorded myself. I just really like having control over doing that. And there are some kind of creative things that I like to do that are different than what other people do. So anyway, so that's the deal. And then how I make sure that it does not go to the house is that down here you can see it says click track and guide track. And so obviously all the clicks are on one track, all the guide tracks are on one track. And I have them going out to sub out 2, right? And so up here, if I go to my song setup, so you can see in my outputs, well, this is not correct now, but usually it would say Sapphire 6. And so sub 1 is output 1 and 2. That's a stereo out. So that's where my tracks, you can see sub 1 on the playback tracks. That goes left and right to the house. And then sub 2 is just mono, and that's what carries both the click and the guide track. And then on the back, obviously on the back of our Sapphire thing here, that is what we use to be able to go straight to house. So it goes to some direct boxes and then into the mixer. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it. Guys, feel free to ask me some questions. I love helping out with this kind of stuff. I'm a little bit of a nerd, so I love, experimenting and doing different things. But, anyways, if this helps you, that's awesome. Like I said, feel free to ask me any questions that you have, and I hope you guys have a great day. Thanks.